the feeling of intense romantic longing when it's targeted onto someone who's not actually with you, or who maybe has made it clear that they don't feel that way about you. It's called limerence. And limerence is very common for people whose emotional needs were neglected when they were kids. And it feels really exciting at first. It can be addictive. But because, by definition, limerent love can never be reciprocated, and because limerence tends to grind away any possibility of real mutual love and fulfillment, it's a special kind of hell. Now, what is it? Real love is something that grows over time in real life by people who each get to know each other and open their hearts to each other and open their lives to each other. Limerence, on the other hand, thrives on non-fulfillment, not actually knowing each other, and in fact, not having it be mutual at all. It's a fantasy. Have you ever been stuck in that place? Today, I'm sharing a powerful letter from my archives from a woman I called Rachel, and she writes, I've been working on my CPTSD on and off throughout most of my 20s, and I'm in therapy now. I'm 30. My best friend since high school has been with me through it all, despite having seen and been impacted by my ugliest behaviors, and he's stayed my friend anyway. I fell in love with him sometime, somewhere, during our long friendship. We eventually got together briefly, and I told him how I felt. He didn't feel the same and didn't want to risk our friendship. I told him I understood and tried to stop my feelings, but I couldn't. Eventually, I asked for space and told him that I needed time away from him so that I could find a real relationship with someone else. I'm going to circle that. He told me I deserved that. Our relationship became superficial for several years, although we always kept in touch. In the meantime, I started dating, and last summer I married my husband and officially became stepmom to his 6-year-old son. I think my relationship with my husband is good. He makes me laugh. We're honest. We work on our issues together. There's a reason I chose him, but it's also routine now. It's doing the dishes and arguing about parenting and worrying about money. Throw in the pandemic and we're drowning in monotony, arguing and anxious and too on top of each other. It's been a very hard year and a half. Yeah, you and me. And it certainly doesn't seem like it's going to end soon. So enter my best friend, says Rachel. We started hanging out in person again this spring once we both were vaccinated. I opened the door, foolishly thinking that now that I was married, I didn't need to be cautious anymore. And sure enough, my old unrequited feelings are flooding back. He makes me so happy, and I feel so much less lonely now. It's such a relief to be myself with him, my full self, not just a wife and a stepmom. I don't have many close friends, and I don't want to lose him again. But I also know it's not fair to my husband, that this could be dangerous to my marriage. Plus, I went down this road before, and he didn't want me. Why would it be any different now when I'm less available than I was before? I guess what I'm asking, Fairy, is how do I do this? How do I soothe the obsessive CPTSD drive that makes me crave his attention, that flirts with the idea that one person could save me, could love me unconditionally, and still keep both these important relationships in my life? I know my feelings are an illusion. Even if I were to somehow change the timeline and was with my best friend, there would still be dishes to do, and I love my husband and our life together. I don't want to mess that up. Can you help me? And I want to add in that something in her letter that I didn't read at the beginning is that she says she grew up in a very enmeshed and codependent household and was also sexually assaulted multiple times as a teenager. Just said that very quickly in the letter. And I think that's relevant. So she says, thank you for all you do. All right, Rachel, I am so glad you wrote and that you asked for advice, and I hope it's not too late to reach you. This is such a good question and good for you. Really positive move. So many of us with CPTSD, when we get into situations that are uncomfortable or shameful or, something we can't be honest about, we just hide more, and you didn't. You're here. So thank you for that. Also, when you share this problem with everybody who's watching this video, we all get to learn from your experience. So you've done a very good thing here. You had a rough upbringing, and I want to congratulate you that you managed to find a marriage with a good person, to become a stepmom with them, and to get to the phase of marriage that literally every couple gets to, which is when you've been together for a little while. Yes, it's a lot of doing dishes. It's a lot of working out your issues, especially if you had trauma when growing up in the way that you attach to your parents. And what you're describing is, yeah, that's going to make it complicated. What I noticed when I got married is that I had gone into it thinking I was being realistic. You know, my marriage is my second marriage. And so I knew that marriage wasn't going to like fix me. It wasn't going to make all the trauma go away. But actually being in a good marriage where I was loved and with somebody who was steady for me really gave an opportunity for some old stuff to come out about the way that I feel so let down by what happened in the past. And like there was this like huge buildup of stuff that I had never really had anybody care about that I had gone through. And I came into the marriage, like we had been together 5 years when we got married, but at the beginning, there was a whole bunch of emotional stuff from me where I was like, okay, now I'm expecting a whole bunch of stuff to be carried by you. And another person can't really do that. So I'm just going to say, like, it is so understandable for you to be going through some issues right now, a year and a half into a marriage, and especially because you're going right in as a step parent, and that has its own issues. I'm really happy for you, though. Like, making that kind of commitment can be so life affirming, and so it can help you grow so much. So you very rightly pointed out, like, you know that a lot of this, like if you were to be with this best friend romantically, even if that could work out, it still would come back to dishes and issues and all that unfinished business from your childhood that hasn't been healed yet. No matter who you're with, it's going to sort of like get directed at them, and that's going to have to be worked out. And that's understandable, and it's okay. And you have a chance right now to work out your stuff with somebody who's actually does want to be with you. One thing I circled is you said that eventually when your friend made it clear that he wasn't interested in this being romantic, you asked for space and told him you needed time away so you could find a real relationship with someone else. And he agreed that you deserve that. Good for him, good for you. And I think what's happening now is you're wobbling. And I can imagine how when you said this and made this boundary, part of you didn't think that really that was where things are going. I could be projecting, but sometimes when we feel like there's a great love with somebody, we want to kind of up the ante with them and be like, you know, I'm going to be with somebody else, and hope that maybe that will kind of push them over the edge and want to be with us. But here's the weird thing I've learned about limerent relationships. So let me tell you about limerence a little bit here. Limerence is a word that was made up not that long ago to talk about this kind of love that's not really love. And what it's characterized by is a total idealization of another person, a total preoccupation with them where you're thinking about them like all the time, where you find yourself, this is a really key thing, you find yourself searching for clues that they feel the same way. And part of limerence is that you're not together. Like, I think occasionally people have limerence and they do get together with that person and they have the chance for the relationship to morph into the kind that you have now with your husband that's ordinary, that's like real love. Real love is the kind that does dishes together, and it's the kind that can love each other and stay with each other through those times when your stuff is coming up and you're being unreasonable, and you come through and you heal together. That's real love. And that is really what I would hope for everybody, is that they find that, because for reasons we don't totally understand, you know, part of this, it could be a brain thing. It could be partly the influence of like TV and movies. But a lot of us are powered by this belief that there's like a true love out there. And if they would just realize it, like everything would be so great. And with that trauma in our background, we have the capacity to think that about people who have said flat out, yeah, I don't feel that way about you. And it's so easy to say to you when it's you, you know, when it was happening to me, it's like I couldn't, you know, it muddies the water so much when it's you, because something in your brain is just so sure, like if they would just see it, it would be great. And looking back on that now with a little healing under my belt and being free from that limerence, I would say that what I can see now is, while there are kinds of love or friendship in there, it's a projection, and it is not something that would work out anyway. Like if you have the luxury of knowing this person who you feel this way about 20 years from now, you may find it's like, oh my gosh, there isn't that compatibility right there, because if there was, they would want to be with you too. Like that's what compatibility is. It's a mutual feeling. So it's not there. It's not there. And I would imagine, because of stuff you went through as a kid, there's some part of your brain that just knows how to do this, that knows how to like fill in the gap. So somebody's like, you like them, they're so interesting, it brings you into technicolor as yourself to be around them. You really feel like you, it feels really good, right? And they're saying, but I'm not into you. But you're like, oh, that's okay. I can kind of move that thought over there, and I can just look at this good feeling I have. And I'll be honest with you, for me, a lot of what healed it was when I developed a spiritual life. And I think that was a lot of what I was looking for. Like even as a small kid, I had had spiritual experiences of being just totally seen and real and appreciative of all the nuance of life. And I could see that. And having somebody to share that with is such a delight. And it comes through different people at different times. And it's not always in every sense and every facet of it going to be the person you're married to. And for anybody who's single out there, I have a feeling that you generally know how to pick friends, like the ones who you go look at art with, and the ones you like to take walks with, and the ones you go to when you're sad. And it's so natural for us to want that all to be in one person. And really, basically, only through fantasy and limerence could we even imagine that one person would be all of that. It just isn't ever like that. It's so disappointing, right? It might be something that we felt as babies when we were with our moms before we even knew what all of the problems were going to be. And it was just this sense of completeness and oneness. So that union that you can feel with the aid of your imagination is so lovely, but it's almost impossible to get on earth. And so we struggle and we suffer. And so, yes, here you are. The first year and a half of marriage, I think if we could take a poll of every married person in this audience, they would go, oh yeah, the first year and a half is hard. The first 2 years, sometimes more, are hard. It's a huge adjustment, even if you were living together before. Even if you had been together a long time, it's a hard adjustment to make that commitment, to go ahead and release that fantasy that this person is ever going to be anything else rather than what they have always been for you, that they're not going to magically turn into somebody with this capacity to heal you in some new way. Now, that said, I will say that I found marriage in its way to be very healing. It was fundamentally just like primally healing about a certain thing, about not being alone. So it's very powerful in that sense. But my husband is not the perfect fulfillment of all the ways that my needs went unmet. He's just a person, and he's great because he stays with me and he shares his life with me and he shares my commitments with me and contributes his energy and love and money and everything to our enterprise of having a home and kids that are stepkids for him. And that's love. And he's with me on my birthday, and he cares about like what I want and where I want to live and what I like to eat. He cares about these things, and he just keeps being there day after day. That's love. That's love. But there have been times in my life when I would have devalued that and continued to look for that limerence, that feeling like, oh, we're like souls meant to be together. For a person with CPTSD, I'm just going to say that's a big red flag. Some people believe in twin souls or soulmates, and that can be a very dangerous thing for people who have wounds in the area of attachment. And I'm just going to put it out there. I don't want to disturb anybody's experience of life, but if you had a traumatic childhood, especially if you were neglected and abandoned by a parent, and you keep finding yourself like person after person thinking it's some kind of soulmate, there is something very bad there. It's not good. And it's very disruptive to the development of a real relationship where you see somebody and can be present. Because as much as you might see yourself as the person who's trying to hold on to and create this like incredible relationship, actually when you're holding on to a fantasy of a person, you're rejecting the real person. That's actually a rejection. And this is the strange thing. When you have attachment problems, when you were wounded in that way as a kid, is that The stronger you feel sometimes, the less present you are. And you know who somebody's going to fall in love with is you present. It's your real self. People might fall into limerence with you, especially if you're younger, you're 30, you're at an age where that, could easily happen. And when you know, because you don't feel the same way, how unrealistic it is, how they're putting you up on a pedestal, it's like, hey, wake up. You're not even here. That's not what's going on between us right here. And then the big thing about limerence is looking for signs, like always searching. And I've been on both sides of that before. And when it's being done to me, when somebody's looking for signs and thinks they saw signs from me that I was into them and they were imagining it, it's really uncomfortable, honestly, and made me want to run away. It's kind of weird. But I've done it to other people, where there's like a little bit of communication and I'm searching and I'm like, but I think this is code for something. And I think they mentioned this because what they really mean is that. And I'm supposed to interpret this as the opposite. If you're doing that, this is not a real relationship. It's not real love. When someone genuinely loves you, they don't leave you in doubt about that. They want you to know. They want you to know that they love you and that they're there. And they want to create this environment that you want to stay in that wouldn't scare you off. So that's a little bit about limerence. And Rachel, you may not have every aspect of what I talked about, but what you've got here is an idealized relationship with somebody who has said flat out they don't feel that way about you. And you asked me what to do. You have acknowledged this is dangerous for your marriage. I know you see everything here, but I have news you're probably not going to want to hear. The thing that you do about this is you end the relationship with the friend. That's what you do. I don't see, based on my experience, I don't see any way that you can have a friend with somebody who you're also in love with and have a successful marriage that's fair to the person to whom you took mutual vows of fidelity, all right? That is really important. When you make a promise to somebody, it doesn't mean that you're always going to have it easy to keep that promise. Sometimes it will seem like something outside yourself would be so much better. But the good news here is it's obvious that this is not better. And I'm sad with you just because you feel not alone with this friend and you have fun. And I'm sad that you don't have that yet with somebody else, but you will. You will have friends who are appropriate for a married woman, who are fun for you and who see you, and you're going to have to put yourself out there. I'm not going to assign bad motives to you here, but when you have a friendship with somebody you're in love with and you're married, one way of looking at that is you are in a deep state of avoidance. And I don't blame you at all. If the family you grew up in was enmeshed and codependent, like maybe what you lack here is a sense of boundaries that you can actually be committed and close to somebody without losing yourself, without getting into an enmeshed and codependent relationship. The fact that you were sexually assaulted when you were young multiple times sounds like, I'm just going to guess, like whatever unhealthy dynamic was going on with the grown-ups, they couldn't protect you from that. Now, no parents are perfect, but if it happened multiple times, there was some kind of like not seeing, not hearing, not talking, veiled everything. And that sounds terrible. And if you grew up that way, you have ahead of you a phase of your development where you heal that, where you teach yourself. A trusted marriage, a marriage where everybody's safe, is such a good place where people can learn things like that. How do I learn to give my commitment and be present to somebody without losing myself? The sort of quickie way to do that is like, I'll just sort of have this friend on the side who really, they really get me. I really love them. When you can't show up and be present for your marriage like that, even if they never realize what that energy is, you know it. People's hearts, whether they are conscious of what they're getting from another person or not, they feel it. And when somebody's not giving you the real love and they're giving it to somebody else instead, it's like you're robbing them. So when you made a decision to get married and be the wife and stepmom in this family, right, you made a promise that this good, sparkly, fun, talented part of you would be shared with them, let's say, every night at the dinner table. Like, you're not always going to be like this ball of fire for them, but this special part of you is something that you committed to share with them and they with you. Well, the child doesn't make a commitment. They're just wonderful anyway. But your husband and you have promised to give each other the best of yourself in that way. And it doesn't mean you don't have friendships outside of it and pursuits. And I want you to have that, but with appropriate people for your marriage. Having a stable marriage is so healing for somebody with CPTSD. And from everything you're telling me, he's a perfectly good person, and he totally deserves for you to not be giving away that like romantic energy to some secret relationship. That is so unfair to him. Your friend doesn't feel this way about you, so even if in some magical world where your husband could tolerate this and it would be no big deal, or it was an open relationship or something, your friend is not into you. And so you would always have this longing. The only way that you're able to keep this romantic idealization of him is because it never comes together, because it's always this separate thing. It's always this sort of pining away for something that you can't have. I'm going to bet $1,000 you had a parent like that where, you had to long for them. And so there's some part of you that really knows how to love deeply when you can't have something. But it's not love. It's not love. It's actually, it's a sort of a fever dream that comes out of pain. It comes out of pain and deprivation and a loss. So you're not going to believe that until you actually take the action of ending that relationship. And I'll tell you, when I ended all relationships like that, it was so awful. I cried. I thought, I can't possibly do this, but I wanted to be emotionally available. I had just met the man who's now my husband, and I knew I needed to get my you-know-what together. I needed to get it together and stop having all these little half relationships out there. And on the advice of a mentor, I ended all those relationships. I cried when I was doing it, and then within 45 minutes, I started to feel so powerful. I felt like, here I am. And it worked. And my husband's like, he's like together. He would never have wanted to be with somebody who had a bunch of friends on the side, who was, kind of like not trustworthy. He would never have done that. If I could have pulled the wool over my eyes, he would have figured it out real quick, that I just wasn't all there. So I showed up. I got on my toes, and that's a sign. When you get on your toes for somebody and do your best, that's a sign that they're good for you. They call you out to be your best. And if you and your husband have that, that's a really good sign. But the fact is, you've made this commitment to each other, and a child is counting on you and that stability at home. So I encourage you strongly, make the most of this marriage you've got with this guy that you love and is there for you and loves you. And let your fantasy go. Let it go and just see what happens. Just see how you feel when you actually, for real, close the door, and not with I just need some space for a while, but just like, and here's the part that you might find kind of hard. I tell everybody this in my dating course. And by the way, if you're watching this and you think that your trauma affected your ability to have good relationships, I have a quiz. It's called the Relationship Quiz. I'll put the link right down below. You'll see it right down there. And if you just sign up for it, I'll send it to your inbox, and you can take that and see if you have common symptoms that PTSD has affected your romantic relationships. And I'm telling you, if you were abused and neglected, it probably has. It has a way of doing that. And you can heal that. All right. So I have a course for people who are dating to help them get very, very clear about this, about clearing up the past, clearing up all these ties to people from the past, so that they can bring their emotional availability and make good decisions and be really present for a good person who comes along. And when you end a relationship with somebody who you have one of these half relationships with, I encourage you to be totally honest with the reason, which is to say, I have sad news. I need to end our friendship. The reason is because I can't get over having romantic feelings for you. And as you know, I'm married, and I have to stop that. And instead of making stuff up and saying, I just think we need space, or my husband is jealous or anything, be honest. Because when we hold on to a fantasy, there is nothing like the sunshine of total honesty to take all the magic charge off of it and reveal it for what it is, which is an attachment to an unavailable person that's keeping you from the best part of your life and the fulfillment that lies ahead. It takes time to be a fulfilled person when you've had all this kind of taken away from you as a child. It takes time, but it never comes from fantasy romances. And speaking of fantasy romance, I have a video that's about that very thing right here coming up next. That could be important for you to watch as well. I'll see you very soon.